Hello and welcome to the main points. Today we're going to be talking about the exciting world of filibustering. I know, it sounds deeply fascinating. It's actually quite an interesting political topic, mainly because of how kind of ridiculous it can be at times. Purely an opinion, but from reading up on it and how long it can last, it can seem to be a bit much. So I guess the best way to start, as always, is by explaining what a filibuster is. A filibuster is a political strategy where a senator speaks or threatens to speak for hours on end to delay efforts to vote for a bill. So a prime example of this was with the Civil Rights Act of 1957. That particular filibuster holds the record for the longest filibuster. It was 24 hours and 18 minutes long. When U.S. Senator Storm Thurmond of South Carolina spoke, reciting things like the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, President George Washington's farewell address, in order to delay voting on the Civil Rights Act of 1957 in an attempt to make sure that it wouldn't pass. This was far from the first time a filibuster was used in order to manipulate what was passed or what wasn't, or how long it took for something to get passed. This also happened with the 28th President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, which ultimately resulted in him denouncing the senators who stalled his proposal and calling them a little group of willful men who had, quote, rendered the great government of the United States helpless and contemptible. Now, Woodrow Wilson's aggravation with the filibuster actually resulted in the Rule 22, which authorized a 2/3 vote to invoke closure of the debate. So usually I would ask, oh, well, what's the problem with this? But I think this is one of those things where it might kind of be clear, but I'll still specify it. Ultimately, the problem with this appears to be that it will cause a lot of political manipulation. So let's say that you're Republican senator and there's a new bill that's being passed by Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They're working together on a bill. You don't approve of it. You think it's an awful idea. It'll completely drain America. So you decide with a group of fellow senators that you're going to have a filibuster. You're all going to take turns speaking for as long as humanly possible in order to prevent this from being passed. In terms of the filibuster, you even have people like Andrew Yang, who was a 2020 presidential candidate, saying on his site, quote, the filibuster is nothing more than a legislative quirk that has been weaponized by both sides to prevent Congress from voting on legislation and presidential appointees. Now, he's not wrong. The filibuster, due to the fact that it requires a 2/3 vote to end, yes, it's possible for a group of people to just collectively say, all right, this is ridiculous. We have to put a stop to this right now. With that being said, it all depends on who the majority is. And if majority of the people within that group agree that whatever bill is being stalled, whatever law is trying to be pushed through, if it's something most of them don't agree with, hypothetically speaking, you could have a situation where most of the people would be like, yeah, there's no way I'm voting for this filibuster to end. Is it exhausting? Potentially, yes, but I am not voting for it to end because it would go against the interests of my particular group. A few really good examples of this are people like Chris Murphy. He did a filibuster for 15 hours. This was reported in 2016 by CNN, with his particular filibuster beginning at 11 a.m. on Wednesday. And the root of his filibuster seemed very much to stem from an effort to do something about the gun laws that existed at that time. Because as a part of his 15-hour-long speech, he showed a photo of Dylan Hockley, who was a 6-year-old that was killed during the Sandy Hook shootings, and said, quote, what can you do to make Orlando or Sandy Hook never, ever, ever happen again? Another quite long filibuster happened with Texas Senator Ted Cruz. He had a filibuster for 21 hours, where during that time he read Green Eggs and Ham from the Senate floor in order to stop the Affordable Care Act from being passed. Now, regardless of political party or political inclination, regardless of who seems right in this particular instance, I think it goes without saying that the fact that someone can, whenever a bill is being is going to be passed that they don't quite approve of take up somewhere from just a few hours to up to 21 hours of people's time in order to stop something from being passed is concerning. Well, what's being done about it? Well, there seem to be relatively divided opinions about what exactly to do about the filibuster. There are Democrats who say, yes, absolutely, we need to get rid of it. For instance, Andrew Yang. There's also Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren. What could be standing in the way of them saying, absolutely, we should eliminate the filibuster? Well, once again, for better or worse, the filibuster does give you the ability to, whenever a law is being passed that you don't approve of, that you truly feel is wrong, it is an opportunity for you to argue against it. If a law is being passed that you feel is horrible for the American people, you can say, you know what, this is ridiculous. I don't even know why this is being considered, so I'm going to sit here for 21 hours and I'm going to explain to everyone here why this piece of legislation is absolutely detrimental to America as a whole. With all of this being said, I think it's also important for us to go into why this even exists. Why would a group of politicians, senators specifically, get together and decide this is a rule that should definitely exist? A filibuster should be allowed where people can speak for as long as they need to speak. Well, according to History.com, who wrote about the history of the filibuster, what started it, how it exists, and everything, the loophole that permits a senator's right to speak endlessly on the Senate floor dates to Vice President Aaron Burr, who declared in 1805 that the Senate need not be burdened by too many procedural rules. Back then, a process to end debate on legislation known as the quote-unquote previous question motion was rarely used, so upon Burr's recommendation, the Senate dropped it in 1806. So essentially, it amounted to someone saying, I think it's kind of ridiculous that we have all of these needless rules. Why don't we just drop one of them? It doesn't seem to be that much of a problem at this time. Well, clearly, that isn't how it ultimately ended up being. Also keep in mind that with things like even a filibuster, there's variations to it. So you have the legislative filibuster, which is what we're primarily talking about, which, as I've been explaining, has been used to prevent voting on certain issues that the legislation has put a certain deadline on and that they're trying to get passed. And an executive filibuster and a judicial filibuster are used to stall a chamber vote on nominations to fill vacancies in different branches in the executive and judicial branches of the government. But regardless, they're all used to put a pause, essentially, on whatever is taking place in that moment with the government, at least in terms of the vacancies that are filled, the laws that are being passed. So let's say we did want to end the filibuster once and for all. How would we even begin to do that? Well, according to the Brookings Institution, the most straightforward way to eliminate the filibuster would be to formally change the text of Senate Rule 22, the cloture rule that requires 60 votes to end debate on legislation. But in order for this to even happen, you have to have support from 2/3 of the members of the Senate. Another option would be establishing a new Senate president, essentially going against the filibuster. So in the same way that if a law or an amendment of any sort is already put out there and not much can be done about it, it already exists and it can't be overturned for some reason, and it can't be overturned. The government in the past has said to itself, okay, well, I'm going to just simply create rules to counteract everything that this specific bill or amendment is saying. So that would be the ultimate alternative to the filibuster that we have now. So ultimately, what should be done? Once again, I'm not going to say this is as complicated as the topic of gerrymandering, where granted there is misinformation on it, and there's certainly a certain perspective a lot of people have based off of that misinformation, or that it's particularly complicated. In my opinion, the filibuster, it isn't the worst thing to happen to the U.S. government by any means, but I can certainly understand from what I have read about it, how it could be misused by anyone to essentially manipulate the outcome of a certain political situation, whether that be regarding guns, whether it be regarding the Affordable Care Act, whether it's regarding really anything. I can understand how it would be misused. And so in turn, I can also understand the hesitation to completely eliminated as a part of the legislative process. To completely eliminate it would eliminate the good it could potentially do. Yes, to maybe some of us as individuals, the idea of someone stopping the Affordable Care Act seems ridiculous, or someone trying to sit there for 15 hours and trying and enforce any sort of gun laws could seem ridiculous. But to members of the government, it's an extremely reasonable thing to do. There's something being passed, or there's something set to be passed, that I feel is dangerous. Whether most people know this or not, whether most citizens of the place that I run feel this way or not, I feel that I am looking out for the people, and so I am going to do everything I can to stop this from being passed. So what should be done? How should we tackle the filibuster, or how should we push politicians to tackle the filibuster? Because ultimately, we as individuals obviously can't just walk into a meeting of senators and just say, hey, we think this is ridiculous. Stop it, please. We have to tell them, we as a collective don't agree with the way this is done. There must be a better option, but that's about it. In my opinion, the best way for this to ultimately be done has to be left up to the senators, whether they want to end it or not. But then that leads to the question, as American people, do we want it to end? Once again, a filibuster could be going on for hours about any topic, whether it's changing gun laws, whether it's changing the Affordable Care Act, whether it involves workplace discrimination on natural hair, for instance. Regardless of the particular topic, a filibuster could be done for hours. So the question is ultimately, are all of us as a collective okay with a filibuster going on for hours and hours on end regarding just about any topic? Are we okay with taking the risk that maybe a filibuster going on for hours and hours on end regarding just about any topic? Are we okay with taking the risk that maybe the particular bill that ultimately doesn't end up getting passed because of a filibuster, because a 2/3 vote wasn't enacted on that particular filibuster? Are we okay with that? Or are we okay with the idea of a filibuster no longer existing and we kind of have to deal with whatever laws ultimately get passed, even if we don't like them? This is ultimately not necessarily an all or nothing situation, but a situation where regardless, there could be a lot of particular scenarios where we would be inclined to be absolutely for a filibuster. And there are a lot of scenarios where we as American citizens would probably be thinking, this is ridiculous. Why has this been going on for so long? This is preventing a very important piece of legislation from being passed through. Well, regardless, those are the main points. So please let me know if I got anything wrong. I will list my sources as well, so you can look further into them and so you can get a better picture of how filibusters work and ultimately decide if the filibuster is something that you think we should stick with, or if it's a concept you think we should just absolutely discard, because why does this exist? Stay safe and have a good day or night wherever you are.